Hi everyone, I'm Sostine and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do something slightly different and talk about minority representation in Disney movies. In particular, we're going to talk about where it fails and of course where it succeeds, as well as where it's just downright racist. While I am a lot of different things and my channel generally focuses on sewing, I am also a woman of color and therefore a minority. And I've had to deal with a lot of racist comments over the years, especially as my channel has grown and as my Instagram presence has increased. And I talk a lot about these difficulties on my Instagram, but I don't really talk about it on YouTube. But at the same time, I do think that YouTube is a great platform to discuss this, especially since I can invite other creators to my channel and we can talk together. So today I've invited 3 of my friends to come and talk about Disney and representation with me. I'd like to introduce Erika from Erika a la Mode. We have Muse from Muse and Dionysus, and we also have Nami from Nami Sparrow Cosplay. Guys, can you take a few minutes to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Erica. I'm Erica a la Mode on social media. I do a lot of Disney cosplay and stuff, so I also work a lot in diversity and in human rights. These are issues that I really care about and media that I really love. Disney is such a magical thing, but it really has a lot of room for improvement to make kids like us feel more included.
Hi, I'm Muse from Muse and Dionysus. We do a lot of Tudor history, but I am a former Disney employee, so I've got a little bit of insight into things that I saw that were definitely sus. And I have a baby, so Disney plays a lot in this house.
Hi, I am Nami from Nami Sparrow. I have cosplayed Jasmine now twice. Disney is a staple in every person's household, and I think because it is such a staple, its problems needs to be addressed because there are a lot of them.
First off, a few warnings for the viewer. First, please keep in mind that this video will have a lot of triggers, especially regarding racism and sexism and violence towards minorities. Secondly, since we will be discussing a lot of Disney movies in their entirety, there will absolutely be spoilers. Thirdly, while we are discussing the racist problems in Disney movies, we are not calling for a boycott or saying you're a terrible person for liking these movies. This is a judgment on the movies, not you, the viewer, for having consumed it. Moreover, I think it's important to notice and be able to talk about the problems with the things we love, as well as the things we don't love. And it's important for us to do this in order to recognize how to move forward and do better in the future. Now, with all these points made, let's get to the discussion. I thought we'd start by talking about the pre-Disney Renaissance movies.
I guess Dumbo and Song of the South would be like 2 that are just so bad. Dumbo, I don't want to like harp on too much because it's been taken out of the like app now, but they literally have a character called Jim Crow. He is a crow and is so stereotypical of the time.
Did you ever see an elephant fly? Well, I seen a horse fly. I seen a dragon fly.
He's singing jazz. It's bad, but I won't touch on that. Song of the South though. For those of you who haven't watched it, which is probably most people, it is about a slave that is telling a story to kids.
Like you was figuring on going someplace.
Oh, yeah.
Animals. It's partly animated, partly live action, about a rabbit that tries to run away from home. And when he runs away from home, there's a bear and a fox that tries to get him. But don't worry, at the end of the day, he escapes them? Question mark. It's very to be interpreted at the end. But he ends up in his briar patch. And it's kind of like the briar patch is his home, but it's also like the briar patch might be the afterlife. Don't run away. And all of the songs are minstrel songs about how happy enslavement was.
My, oh my, what a wonderful day.
That there is still a ride at Walt Disney World today, commemorating it.
I think the worst part about this is that like I never even realized that the Splash Mountain ride was based off of this incredibly racist movie. I thought it was just a funny story about a bunny rabbit trying to go home. And
I
even
thought it was just a mountain with some water at the end of it. Like,
I had no idea there was even a story associated with it because so much of Disney has stifled the history of Song of the South.
I didn't realize how bad it was until I worked there briefly. But when I did work there, they were like, hey, this movie exists, but please do not watch it, which of course that meant that I had to watch it. And my jaw just was dropped the entire movie. And I remember talking to my mom and I was like, have you heard of this? And she was like, oh yeah, I've heard of this. And I remember when they were going to build the ride, but they like officially made it Splash Mountain after Song of the South, 80s, the 70s or 80s, like in my mom's lifetime. If you get a chance to watch any of the ride throughs, listening to it is the stereotypical voices that you would hear for enslaved people during that time. If you take away all the characters and the fluffy rabbits and the singing animals, it is literally a stereotype of Black people. And it's very questionable whether Brer Fox and Brer Bear are Black. They also have this stereotypical voice, but I mean, there were slave catchers that were Black. There were slave catchers that were poor and white. So it could be either or. But it's bad and it still exists. And I know they're changing it, but they decided to change it in 2020.
But also, like, they're changing it into a Princess and the Frog ride, which, I mean, I adore Tiana, but for them to be like, oh yeah, well, we're gonna give the ex-slavery ride to the one Black princess. Really?
I should also note, if you have not been to Walt Disney World, the princesses tend to stay in Fantasyland, which is like, basically, it's like Princess Palooza, except for brown princesses.
so I mean, speaking of stereotypical representation of Black people, I just want to bring up Cinderella.
Those mice, I've like blocked a lot of that movie, the animated movie, out of my head because those mice were as close as you could get to a mammy figure without having a mammy figure in the movie. They took care of her. They made sure that she had clothes. They always watched out for her. It was almost as if the lowest person in the household could not be a white person.
Accent that they gave the mice, and it's just it like, I just remember as a kid going, that's kind of weird, and then growing up I watched it again, and when I was a teenager I was like, this is like unwatchable.
They fix her. She'll never get her dress done.
It's bad, and I really do think that they thought that people at the time would not be comfortable with a nice blonde lady being in a subservient role, even though that's the whole premise of Cinderella.
I mean, they always have an animal figure helping the main character, right? Every single time. But that animal figure usually doesn't speak. Like, they could have just not had the mice speak, and I think it would have been better.
Yeah.
And there's a huge history that Disney has of replacing BIPOC with animals, because apparently animals are easier to stomach for audiences on screen than colored faces.
But instead, I think they thought that the mice were going to be an element of humor, which, I mean, I guess, but like, humor for who?
I felt like Asians were completely ignored by Disney as a whole. Like, brown people were ignored. Like, but the one character I remember being like, even as a kid, being really upset by were the two cats in Lady and the Tramp. You know the song "We Are Siamese"?
We are Siamese, if you please.
I remember as a kid being so upset by this because they were the villains, and they were I don't know, the only Asian representation I had until Mulan.
Not in Disney movies, no. Apparently we didn't exist in the US until Mulan. Yeah, we sprung from the ground in the 90s. I have a stress response to that song because of all the kids who would sing it at me when I was little. And they would like pull their eyes back and stuff and chant that and stuff at all the Asian kids and stuff. And so I don't do Lady and the Tramp anymore. Yeah, it's not for me.
Heard the song sung, and I thought that was just a mean thing that children made up.
If I'm remembering correctly, there was no need for that song. At the time, Disney didn't even do the trend of the villains having a song. So there wasn't even the need for that song to be in there in the first place.
Disney loves to use racial caricatures for humor, and we see that like with the mice in Cinderella. They use these racial stereotypes and turn them into animal caricatures and put them in for comedic value.
Do you seeing that thing swimming round and round? Yes.
I mean, it's a way to basically keep the idea of white supremacy alive in the next generation without having to force it down their throats. Now, obviously, we watch things and we're like, yeah, no, that I'm not letting my child, my friend, myself watch that. But if you are watching that in an environment where these things don't get addressed, then it's just another fun song.
All content comes after the 90s because brown people didn't exist until then. Even as
that's the reason.
We had brown people in Peter Pan, not a good representation of them, but yeah.
And I like how it's so ingrained in that story that like in the other films, like in Dumbo and in Lion King, they just could edit out certain of the more problematic scenes. But Peter Pan, their problematic elements are so deeply ingrained in the story that they couldn't even edit it out. So they were like, well, if like short of taking it off Disney Plus entirely, the only thing we can do is put a warning at the beginning saying there are some problematic things that you're going to see here.
I don't want to like talk on it because I'm not Indigenous, but oh my gosh, every Indigenous song in Disney history is terrible, is abhorrent. I literally don't even want to say the titles of some of those songs. You can Google those titles. They are terrible. Every time you see an Indigenous person in Peter Pan, it is an excuse to literally make fun. Like every single time it's an excuse to make fun of folks. That's the only reason.
So that brings us to the Disney Renaissance films. I mean, there's not much to say about a bunch of them, but what about, I think the first one is actually Aladdin?
Yeah, I believe so. And oh man, do I have a lot of things to talk about Aladdin. And I want to preface all of this with saying that like, I love this movie, but it's also very bad. I mean, hey, do we want to talk about literally like the opening song with
it's barbaric, but hey, it's home.
Oh, and they changed the lyrics in that. They changed the lyrics because originally the lyrics were about the like cut off your hands and stuff. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. And then they changed it to like the heat of the desert is barbaric, but hey, it's home.
Where it's flat and immense and the heat is intense, it's barbaric.
You couldn't have changed the barbaric part too? Like you were changing lyrics, you couldn't have changed that?
All of Aladdin, it has an overarching problem of all brown, South Asian, Middle Eastern, North African people are the same. This is your movie. This is your
amalgamate culture.
Funny, because growing up, I would have white kids tell me, oh, Jasmine isn't Black. Jasmine could be North African. They don't say. She could be Persian, she could be Indian, she could be North African. She is from the Swana region.
Yep, and it's absurd. And I think, the worst part about Jasmine, just as a very base level, is that every other Disney princess is the hero of her own movie. Jasmine is the love interest, she is the prop. Starts in on that insidious like devaluing of brown women and not viewing them as people with their own ability to make decisions.
Think about it, like literally every other Disney princess has their own movie.
The thing that also sucks is that we are furthering brown criminal stereotypes.
I had to slit a few throats, but I got it.
Within this movie, because Aladdin is a con man and a criminal.
I steal only what I can afford. That's everything.
And we are furthering the naivete of brown women because Jasmine not only falls for him, she forgives him for his BS. Then we come into my favorite thing, all of the Orientalist stereotypes. It is just a list of stereotypes. It is women in scantily clad in harem outfits. It is, a bazaar. It is set in a desert. It has the Taj Mahal there for some reason. It is a sultan. It is exotic market scenes. It is the pet tiger. It is the exotic animals. It is all of these ideas of what people thought the East was because of Orientalist stereotypes. And this was made in the 90s when people knew that that wasn't a thing. And it was just like, what if the only plot that we had was a princess dressed in a harem outfit?
She's also royalty. Why is she dressed so scantily clad? She lives in a palace, and the whole premise of this movie is daddy protects her too much.
Speaking of these stereotypes, like the song Prince Ali is literally a pile of every single Asian stereotype.
75 golden candles.
Like literally, they just go through the whole list of them.
One of the most egregious things about this film, which is the over-sexualization of Jasmine and the fact that she is the only Disney princess who is over-sexualized like this, to the point where she literally changes into a sinful all-red sexy outfit at 16. It falls back into the brown women are objects. And it is part of the reason there is so much brown fever abuse that you get from men as a brown woman in this country. That is the representation that they see.
Just mention the red dress scene really quickly. Like, she actually not just wears a sexy outfit, she acts sexy. I think the only scene with more come hither eyes is the Nala eyes that started all of furrydom. And do you know the Nala eyes? Like,
no.
Yeah.
I have had actual furry friends tell me that is when they knew they were furries.
It's made such a big point that she has not reached the age of consent in her country yet. Yet it's okay to have that scene at the end where she's literally being sexualized for the pleasure of a grown man.
And then the continuation of all of this sexualized nonsense brings me to the brothel scene. And I would like to clarify all of this by saying that we are very pro sex work in this house, but that is not what this is about. This is about the perception in the world that sex work is inherently bad. And the only time it is shown in Disney is in terms of brown women, is to one, make brown women explicitly sex objects while at the same time desexing the main brown man by saying he is unworthy of their attention. It is twofold. I'm going to go on to one of the sadder things, in my opinion. She does not look like a brown woman, but it is used by people as an excuse to cast white women as Jasmine. It is used as an excuse to erase the one brown princess we have. So while Jasmine looked like me because she was painted slightly tan, Jasmine also doesn't look like me. She doesn't look like brown people. When you start to defend multi-billion-dollar companies for not doing the diversity outreach, what you're really saying is that the feelings and hurts of people of color don't matter because, oh no, it would slightly inconvenient this poor company to do the right thing.
What really gets to me about Aladdin is that even just picking this story ostensibly is part of 1001 Nights. If you look at the history of the story itself, it was actually added during a translation that was done in the 18th century by a French author. This story did not really exist in 1001 Nights prior to that. The French author claimed that he wrote it based on a narrative that he had heard from a Middle Eastern guy. But what you see is that he actually placed the story in China and used all of these just generically Orientalist stereotypes. And so it becomes sort of like white fantasy projected onto Orientalist stereotypes and treats every Oriental culture as one amalgamate blob.
Jasmine looks like us, but Jasmine is none of us. And in the way Jasmine just exists to make a mockery of brown culture and pretend that we are all the same. And that is exotic for the purpose of the white man's consumption.
Let's move on to Lion King. Muse, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah. First of all, let's talk about Lion King.
I thought you were talking about Timba.
Oh yeah, right. Let's get into it about this. Like, Hamlet and the Lion King share a lot of similarities. They could have just used any African story. There are so many of them. They could have picked one from anywhere. and used that because a lot of African stories are parables. So you could have gone Ghanaian, you could have gone Kenyan, you could have gone Nigerian, like you could have picked, but no, let's make this little Hamlet parable. Let's do that. I don't know how much research y'all know that Disney did. They got real lions to study how real lions were so they could animate realistic lions.
And they couldn't hire brown people?
People. Why weren't there people? Why? Also, why is one of the strongest voice characters in all of Black acting history? Why does he die in the first few minutes of this movie? Like, I get they're animals. I understand that. But like, he was one of the main Black voice actors.
When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass.
Next to Whoopi Goldberg, but also she's not in most of the film because she plays one of the sidekicks.
Well, Bonsai, what have we got here?
There are so many things within that film, and I love that film. I came home after seeing that film, and I was Simba for like 3 months. There are so many pieces within it that just make me go, this was simply a little bit of lazy writing, despite having all of the background to not be lazy whatsoever. There's definitely a commonality between the Be Prepared song and like the Third Reich and all that jazz, right? Black people have their own villains. There are stories within Africa of like warlords from ancient history. Like, why couldn't we take this of people who were money hungry, why couldn't we use any of these examples? And I understand that using a dictator, a more modern dictator that more people can relate to, and they might have learned in school and all that jazz, I understand. If you're going to do all of this research and put all of this information into this movie, why not just go all the way with it? I feel like with the live action, they tried to right some wrong. Disney, stop trying to make animals live action. And it felt like we are blackity black. We messed up in the 90s, but now we're Black. We got Beyonce. We got Childish Gambino. We are Black. Anybody hit a record? We're so Black. We're going to let Beyonce make her own song for this. We're so Black. Instead of just doing it right from the first time, or even correcting the wrongs the second time around. If anyone has had the chance to see Lion King on Broadway or on a tour, it is amazing puppetry, it is amazing costuming, it is amazing, and you get the feel of the fact that there are lions involved in the story, but it is a story told by people for people. And that could have been done with the live action. I do want to go back and touch on the hyena. The hyenas were there to be a stereotype of what Black people are. They were just there to be a laughing stock, really.
Fine, a Cub sandwich. What you think? What? And
They were minstrels.
And
yes.
They also needed the lion overlord from the civilized race of lions to keep them in line because they were just such buffoons.
The British lion.
I don't think you really deserve this. I practically gift wrapped those cubs for you.
I have an African accent. And I think the best part about this whole movie, the fact that at the end, the person that sides with the Black people, or who are supposed to be playing the stereotypes of the Black people and everything that fits in that with the hyenas, they couldn't rule the land. Do you really think that animals in the wild would eat through their entire source of food in like a couple months? I don't know how long it takes for a lion to grow out. Maybe it was like 2 years. But do you really think that's going to happen? And then, do you think that those animals are just going to be so dumb that they're just going to stay there?
Hyenas. I hate hyenas.
The food's gone. We're going to stay there. It felt like they were trying to make the point that, like, see, we can't let them have too much. They'll ruin it, and they don't know how to fix it.
What I take issue with, again, with telling Hamlet as the Lion King, is that here, like exactly like with Aladdin, you're telling a white story using a puppet theater of an African backdrop. They were like, let's just use elements of Africa, of an amalgamous Africa, and let's make it into a white fantasy story. We're going to project our morals onto it, our storytelling onto it, our histories onto it and stuff. And we're not going to tell an authentic African story. What we're going to do is tell a white story using African puppets.
When you look at the big Disney movies, the big Renaissance movies of the 90s, it's usually set in a far off place a long, long time ago. And you could kind of imagine, like, even if things are accurate as a kid, you usually don't know. And you're like, wow, this was a long time ago. Maybe things were different back then. We don't know when The Lion King is set. It could have been set a day before the movie came out. Africa in itself is a far off place, and it's exotic. And it's so different that just simply having the movie set in Africa was enough history for them.
Can we just talk about how it's another Disney movie where we have Black people being replaced by animals? Like it's just another trend of that.
It feels like a reflection of the Cinderella phenomenon that we were just talking about, how it was more palatable for people to see animals instead of seeing Black people or people of color. And so it's easier to tell a story with animals in Africa than it would be to tell a story with Black people in Africa. Because
Erika, you were talking about how you just had to play any brown princess and people were happy. I also experienced that, but there was always one kid that was like, you could be Nala. I'm like, so everyone else is human, right? Human beings, and I will be the lion. Yeah, because it's the Black movie, right? And I'm like, I don't want to be, I'll be anyone but the lion when we play dress up as a princess. Why? Because Black people were good enough for their talents to be used for the singing. Because of course there's the stereotype that Black people can sing really well, right? So they could use Black people for the singing for the movie and for some comedic bits and for some powerful voice acting. These are all stereotypes. The fortunate and unfortunate part of it is that it did really well. And it made people want to learn more about Black culture, about Africa, about different pieces of Africa. The unfortunate thing is, when we think of Africa in the 90s, it is always filming someone who is sitting in the dirt saying that they do not have money and to please help them, even though Africa is a well-developed continent. Like, there's no reason why that took place. But because they didn't even take the time to set this in a previous time period, it played into what we were already seeing on TV. It's just so different, and they need our help.
Sad Sarah McLachlan music plays in the background.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
I buy that.
So we're not gonna talk about Pocahontas a lot here because
it's not problematic.
It is literally oozing problems from all of its pores. It is just a problematic package wrapped up with a problematic bow with a problematic stamp on top. It is not our place. None of us are Indigenous. It's not our place to talk about it. But listen, guys, you cannot consume Pocahontas without realizing how bad it is.
One study that I found really interesting was a paper called Of Warrior Chiefs and Indian Princesses, and it discusses the psychological consequences of American Indian mascots. When Indigenous kids are reminded of Pocahontas before going into an exam or something like that, they'll perform significantly worse on that exam than they would have without that schema being triggered, because it triggers a sense of negative self-concept, damages performance later down the line. So hard for me to be like, this movie has redeeming qualities when it has a tangible negative impact on these children.
Well, and it's another case of a slur being the title of a song in a movie. What? Why? Why do we have that? Why was that a thing in the 90s? And it's also another case of someone being magical to help white people. I mean, yes, I understand the whole grandmother Willow and she came back as a tree and so that Pocahontas can, but why does she need to get the power to talk to white people? The stereotypes in that film can be seen all throughout Disney's history and present with brown people.
Erika, would you like to start this one?
Oh God, where do we even start with Mulan?
I thought that the animated Mulan was like pretty good. Like it tells an Asian story, you know, it's that originated in Asia.
But it's not at all like the Ballad of Mulan. It's very confusing. It's like, I don't know if you guys have read the Ballad of Mulan.
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's nothing. It's nothing like the Disney version. But I actually think that that's why it was so popular with, particularly with Chinese American audiences and with Chinese audiences, because we already have pretty good adaptations of Mulan. The film ended up being really popular with like Chinese audiences in large part because of the musical numbers and because of Mushu.
Do I look like a sucker to you?
Chinese people love Mushu.
Say, as an Asian woman, how much Mulan actually meant to me. First off, I'm Korean, I'm not Chinese. I don't know much about the Chinese cultures referenced in it, but like the importance of family, importance of doing your duty to your family, is something that I was personally very like raised with very strongly. So it actually spoke a lot to me. Mulan works really hard to get what she needs. It really spoke to me.
If they had just made the animated one into a live action one, instead of trying to make it more accurate by putting witches and like Western fantasy elements in it, I think it would have gone over a lot better with Asian audiences, because a lot of us actually like the animated one, even though it's built almost entirely off of racial stereotypes.
Remember, the doctor said 3 cups of tea in the morning.
It's a bop. Like, let's get down to business. Like, it's a lot of fun, and like, sure, the Huns are actually pretty racist and completely historically inaccurate, because like the Ruruns actually were the only thing that they kind of got more accurate in the live action one. But you know, a lot of us actually liked the animated one because it didn't even try. It didn't even pretend to be historically accurate or close to the ballad. And so I think that's what made it fun. It was just like a fun fantasy musical with like a talking dragon and a sassy horse. And then you get to the live action one and they're like, she's magical. She's not a good warrior because she worked hard or because she's clever or because she's smart or because she brings something new to the table. She's got Asian female magic.
Emperor.
Here's the worst part. They brought Western fantasy into it instead of Eastern fantasy. There is a rich history of like actual Chinese fantasy content. It is there and it is really good. And instead they were like, but what if witches and if Qi was like wire magic? And it's like, do you even know what Qi is?
So here's the thing. Qi literally is just energy. It's everyone has it. It doesn't turn you into a bird. But when I watched Mulan, part of my soul left my body because I was like, wow, I was waiting for my Hogwarts letter for so long. And all I had to do was channel my God-given Qi to turn into a bird. It was so strange to see all of these Western fantasy elements imposed onto the Ballad of Mulan. And then when I looked into the production team, it made a lot of sense because we have a white director, we've got a white costume designer, we've got 4 white screenwriters, we've got a white composer, white cinematographer, white editor, white casting director and stuff. And that's where you see there's no genuine knowledge of Chinese culture or history or aesthetic in this film. Particularly when you look at the writing, they threw in a lot of Western fantasy elements. Like Chinese culture doesn't really have witches in this sense. Like we have shamans and stuff and like soothsayers and stuff, but their powers are actually pretty valued in Chinese culture. They're not ostracized. And so the whole like, oh, well, she's rejected because she's a witch and stuff, and that's why she doesn't have a place in court. Actually, Chinese witches held pretty high statuses in courts. This is a very Western concept for her to be like, burn the witch. The crime was always if you used your magic to harm someone, not inherently having magic. So the whole reason why Mulan is special in the ballad is because she is a normal person. She starts out the ballad sighing at her loom because she's working on fabric like us. you know, but she loves her father so much that she's so determined to become this warrior, to take care of her family so that he doesn't have to go to war, so that she can become this great warrior. And you see that reflected more in the animated one, opposed to just being born into these naturally exotic Asian woman powers that it plays into this whole mysticism and exoticism around Asian women that we are just so mysterious and seductive and full of magic because we couldn't possibly just be normal women. She's special because she's got Asian woman magic. Some of the changes that they make don't make any sense to me because okay, so in Mulan, you know how they add the virtues, and they have the whole loyal, brave, and true song or whatever. But yeah, that's actually the FBI motto. I thought about it and I was like, the FBI motto, fidelity, honesty, integrity, or something like that. And I was like, isn't that exactly what they put on Mulan's sword? Which are not even anything like the 4 Chinese virtues, by the way, which are propriety, righteousness, integrity, and shame, which is very hard to explain to Western audiences. It's not modesty, not literal.
Shame.
Must feel shame.
Shame.
And I mean, I get that it's a hard culture to explain, but they could have done a slightly better job than this. Honestly, I feel like the animated movie, for all of its stereotypes and them eating bland rice at a table,
Funny story about the rice, by the way. Apparently, it was an animation error in that the animator who was supposed to put all the side dishes straight up forgot and was like, guys, this is my bad. Came out in a Twitter thread.
It told a good story that a lot of people could relate to.
I grew up loving Mulan because I'm non-binary, and she has that change, and she doesn't end as a princess, and she doesn't try to get a man at the end. Her man comes to her and is like, can she hang out? And she's like, I mean, I guess I'm tired. I just got home.
If you look at the live action one, there's some weird things that they throw into the story that have absolutely nothing to do with Asian culture, but they're this seems vaguely Asian, so we're just gonna put it in there. Well, at one point there's some line about how Cricket talks was born under an auspicious moon, and me and all of my other Chinese friends were like, what does that even mean, dude? Phoenixes must mean the same thing. Phoenixes actually mean something very, very different in Asian culture. By the way, our phoenixes don't rise from ashes. They don't burn up and then come back. It's not a symbol of reincarnation. It's actually more a symbol of femininity.
It symbolizes the freaking queen.
Yeah, it's a symbol of the empress. So I was confused for half of the movie. Is she gonna marry the emperor? Is that what's gonna happen? She's gonna save China and then become the empress? They could have just changed a few buzzwords and it would have made it more Asian, which leads us into a whole different other issue with the live action one, the zero knowledge of Chinese aesthetic or history. Okay, so she's Northern Chinese, but the aesthetic that they chose for the villages in the round villages that they had in the live action is actually a Southern Chinese structure, exclusively Southern Chinese. Those do not exist anywhere in Northern China. And so it just didn't make any sense because they were separate kingdoms at the time. The emperor would not have been recruiting from Southern China to fight the Northern Chinese War. Mulan would not have been in Southern China. It treats China like one amalgamous, homogenous culture when there are more than 55 ethnic groups recognized in China, let alone the ones that are not recognized, which leads me into my biggest issue with live action Mulan. And the fact is, Disney threw money into a region of China that is actually home to one of the greatest ongoing human rights crises in the country. The credits specifically thank 4 Chinese Communist Party propaganda departments and the Public Security Bureau of this specific region in China. And right now, this region in China has between 1 to 2 million Uyghur Muslims imprisoned in concentration camps. And the forced sterilization of the Uyghur Muslims has caused the birth rates to drop by approximately 25%. And Disney of all the regions that they could have worked with, chose to work with this region that's currently committing genocide against the Uyghur ethnic minority. And like historians actually agree that that Mulan was likely a member of the Proto-Mongolic ethnic group, but that was completely erased from the narrative and replaced with the dominant ethnic group Han Chinese, the pale, generally accepted by European standards Chinese people, and then the Mongolic looking people became the villains. Disney was like, we're just gonna throw money into it. We're gonna contribute to that massive human rights atrocity and make a story that appropriates their character too.
Ooh, I'm ready for this one. I'm gonna make some people mad. Tiana is as close to a mammy figure that they could have gotten without literally having a mammy figure. So we'll run through the whole movie. First of all, it's set in the 1920s in New Orleans. New Orleans is known for being one of the most diverse places in the South. It has some of the most relaxed laws around race. It also has a history of slavery, much like most of America has a history of slavery. When we start off the movie, we see that Tiana lives in a little shack as she goes to this really big house with her friend Lottie, who is super rich. Slavery continued after 1865. In the 1920s, it would not have been out of the realm to think that Lottie's home was a former plantation home, which might have only been a generation away, if that. I mean, her parents might have grown up with having enslaved people in their house. And the dad passes, which I'll only touch on that briefly because Disney likes to kill off everybody's parent. But like the fact that a strong Black man had to die in this movie just plays into so many stereotypes.
Don't you worry, Daddy. We'll be there soon.
And Tiana works hard. She works multiple jobs. We see her barely going down to sleep before she has to get back up because she wants to own a restaurant. She wants to cook for a living. She loves taking care of people. And she's full of nuggets of advice. And she's happy as long as she's working. You know, like a mammy.
I need to dig a little deeper and work even harder to get my restaurant.
But she works hard to get what she wants. So like she could have been loaned the money, but she wasn't. She finally gets enough money. And when she does, redlining takes place and she's outbid for her place. Why couldn't Tiana be a stupid girl in a dress?
Yes! I'm so angry that every other princess is like, you get your princess story and your big happy ending. Congrats, Tiana. You can work harder now.
I think it would have been a much more interesting story if Tiana was Lottie. If she was just some airhead little girl who came from money and she was just like, I don't like to work for anything. Like there were so many different options they could have gone with. Long story short, we know she kisses a frog and she turns into a frog, right? With her prince. Let's talk about Prince Naveen. He is from ? Maybe Europe, maybe it's South America. Who knows? He's from a brown place.
Here's the thing, actually. Naveen is an Indian name. So the whole time, Naveen shows up, I was like, why are they not giving the Black princess a Black prince?
But even if they would have given her an Indian prince, why wasn't he an Indian prince? But his parents have also cut him off until he gets married. So he is broke and he does not like to work. They're living their frog life. And Tiana is she's giving off these little pieces of wisdom and she's taking care of all of the animal friends that we meet along the way and putting her needs last.
Anyone for seconds?
Like a mammy figure. I do want to go back and talk about how she got turned into a frog because voodoo and hoodoo are real religions practiced in many African cultures.
You're in my world now, not your world.
And not just a magical thing that Black people in New Orleans have.
That's an echo, gentlemen. Just a little something we have here in Louisiana. A little parlor trick, don't worry.
Shadow Man is one of the most scary villains in all of Disney history. He is playing with demons.
Satisfied.
What? In a children's film, At the end of the movie, the demons take him away. Why couldn't the villain character have been the person who bought the place from her?
About that,
She meets a nice voodoo or hoodoo practitioner, because we don't know what Mama Odie is. She is just an old nice lady who also knows about magic. But like, Tiana doesn't take away the lesson that she should work less and that she deserves to be cared for and all this jazz. She's like, yeah, you're right. I should get back to being a human so I can keep on working.
Can we just mention that, it's the yellow princess and the black princess that has to work,
Especially when Bridgerton came out and people were like, I wish they would have touched on race more. I enjoy seeing Black people in pretty outfits. Sometimes I want to watch Black people just be Black people. We don't have to be enslaved. We don't have to have lost somebody. We don't have to be sad. We don't have to be holding our firstborn, wondering how we're going to feed them. Sometimes I just want to watch Black people sit around and be happy, and there be no additional context needed.
Yeah, that is so wild. How dare you want the happy stories that literally white people get all the time?
The ending of Princess and the Frog bothered me so much because she just gets alone. She doesn't stop being the mammy figure. She's gonna continue to do that for the rest of her days,
and she doesn't get money. She marries this man, this prince, who is supposed to get all of his wealth when he gets married. And he's like, you know what? I like playing the ukulele in your kitchen. I'm not doing any of the skills you taught me. You taught me how to work and value hard work. And I value you because you're taking care of us. Can we talk about Louis the Gator for a second and how they could have just had a Louis Armstrong character and it would have worked? Because we're in New Orleans for the setting of this movie. It is not out of the realm to have a jazz figure, possibly one of the greatest jazz figures here. You're going to be an animal too. We don't have to ask your family or your estate about this. So we're just going to kind of make you an animal and get away with it. And yeah, you did, but like, yikes. There were so many racist things that came out after that. Candy that was released, and it was all of the like classic princesses or like classic and Renaissance princesses, and also Tiana. And her candy is the watermelon candy.
What?
Wait, it gets better, because you're probably like, I mean, her dress is green. No, it's pink. It's pink watermelon flavor. They didn't even try to make it make sense.
Green apple, just make it green apple. Everybody loves green apple.
Here's the other thing. Disney knew they did a big bad, and then they recalled that candy. Another thing that hits me as a former Disney employee and a former entertainment Disney employee at that, Tiana has always been ostracized. Like, yes, she's in the Princess Hall, but she didn't get to be part of the castle show that guests see every day. And then they put her at this place in Liberty Square, which also not the time period of her movie, in a unair-conditioned spot that is very hard to find. And now they're going to make a ride for her based off of the old slave ride. And for her to just be pushed aside just really says something.
I just want to make sure it is abundantly clear that Tiana should only be played by a dark-skinned Black person. If you wonder, is that person Black? They're not dark enough. Dark-skinned Black person. Tiana is dark-skinned. Dark skin is beautiful. Tiana is dark-skinned.
When people come to the park and they want to meet Tiana, they want to meet a dark-skinned Black woman who looks like them. And it is a little kid running up, and it's like, you look like me. You have my hair. You look like me.
So seriously, thank you guys so much. Fun is a strong word. I would say this was cathartic. And it's really nice to meet other people who also feel like this, because I feel so validated.
Yeah, people who love Disney but also acknowledge like, Disney, you're problematic. Please work on this.
I love you, Disney, but could we not?